Right here, we're going to go into our topical study for today. And what we're going into is another study into that Bites of Prophetic Delights channel, our playlist on our YouTube channel. So far, we've gone through a list. Most recently, we've got a whole bunch of studies on our list where we collect and connect the prophetic dots of all sorts of the God's prophetic program. So we're doing that in order just to see what some of these books talk about, a lot of the minor prophets, major prophets, and we plug them back into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We go back and even look at Job, Psalms, Proverbs, and see how they just plug in with a multitude of different things. We also go back into Hebrews, the Revelation. We just kind of collect and connect all these dots and to see God's prophetic program so we can see what's going on in there. And so far, what we've gone through in the past couple of studies, we've gone through what we've seen as Psalm chapter 2, verse 4, and we plugged in why the Lord laughs. We call it the Lord snickers, why the Lord laughs. We've gone through Job chapter 2, verse 11. We had part 1 and part 2, talking about Job's three friends or Job's three musketeers. We went through that, had a 2-part study on that. We then went into Hosea chapter 7, talking about Hosea's half-baked cake, and that's kind of what it was calling it Israel, that Israel was like a cake, cooked only on one side. They were useless, and that was the culture and the politics of that time in the book of Hosea. Then we went into the little flock's angels food cake, where we were going into Revelation chapter 2, talking about the hidden manna that they received when they flee into the mountains from Matthew chapter 24. We'd gone into that in our last study. All these different types of desserts, I guess you can call it. So now we're going into the type of a roll we're going into today, which is Zechariah's roll. And of course, when you actually get to the study, it's not talking at all about food when you talk about a roll, but we'll get into that completely today. So we'll go into Zechariah chapter 5, and we'll go into verse 1, and this is kind of what we're going to be reading about today. And so we're going to be seeing how, as we get into the book of Zechariah, it's not going to be like when we studied the book of Hosea. In the book of Hosea, we were in chapter 7. We were going and we were seeing about how Israel's politics, Israel's culture, Israel's society was getting worse and worse and worse. And Hosea chapter 7 was just talking about how they needed to change their mind. They needed to repent of all the wickedness that was going on, or else they were going to be brought into the 5th course of judgment from Leviticus 26, and they were going to be brought into captivity. In this case, it was going to be, in the case of Hosea, it was going to be in Assyria. Assyria was going to come and take them away, and indeed, that's exactly what happened. And with the southern kingdom, it was going to be with Babylon. And indeed, that's exactly what had happened. So when you read Hosea, you're seeing essentially the message being, Israel, you're wicked, and you need to repent of, you change your mind about everything you're doing so that these courses of judgment don't take place, because God's promised to make sure these things happen if this is indeed the path you're going to take. And setting up the kingdom, establishing the kingdom, that type of thing. But the last 3 visions of Zechariah lean towards vengeance and wrath and the day of the Lord, and that's what we're going to see here in vision 6 and vision 7 and vision 8, but we won't get into vision 8 today. But that's the type of topic it heads toward. So we see here in Zechariah chapter 5, we'll go into verse 1. It says, "Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll." And there's our verse for today. Of course, the flying roll, we'll get into what it's actually talking about. It's not the cinnamon roll that we have on our website there. It says, "And he said unto me, What seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. Then he said unto me, This is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth, for everyone that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side according to it. And everyone that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side according to it. I will bring it forth, saith the Lord of hosts, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name, and it shall remain in the midst of his house, and shall consume it with the timber thereof, and the stones thereof. Then the angel that talked with me went forth, and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes, and see what is this that goeth forth. And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. And he said, Moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. And he said, This is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. And I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. And they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. And said I to the angel that talked with me, Whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, To build it an house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there upon her own base. So that's Zechariah chapter 5, just kind of reading through the 11 verses, kind of going back into verse 1 and kind of looking at where we're at and what we're reading here. Of course, it's starting out with the sixth vision here. And it says here, then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and behold, and looked, and behold, a flying roll. So we're seeing this is how it's starting out here. And he's saying this is going to be a roll. If we look at Ezra chapter 6, verse 1, you see exactly the concept of a flying roll. And that's Ezra chapter 6. Go there into verse 1. Get there as well. We see here it says in Ezra chapter 6, it says, Then Darius the king made a decree, and search was made in the house of the rolls, where the treasures were laid up in Babylon. And there was found at Achmetha in the palace that is in the province of the Medes, a roll, and therein was a record thus written. In the first year of Cyrus the king, the same Cyrus the king, made a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be builded, the place where they offered sacrifices, and let the foundations thereof be strongly laid. The heights thereof 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 60 cubits. And it kind of keeps going on and on about what needs to be done, and there in Babylon with Darius the king. But of course, it's in the house of the rolls we're seeing here. And it also talks about how there was in the province of the Medes a roll. And so it goes on just talking about this, the concept of the fact that there's a roll, book rolled up in a scroll. That's what a roll is. I mean, not that we didn't know this pretty much, the concept of the idea, but when we see it laid out in scripture, we're seeing better definition of what we're talking about here. Look at Jeremiah chapter 36. We look at verse 1. Jeremiah chapter 36 and verse 1. See it again. Instead of looking at just Ezra 6, chapter 6, verse 1, never seen Jeremiah 36, verse 1. And what we see here, it says, And it came to pass in the fourth year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, that this word came unto Jeremiah from the Lord, saying, take thee a roll of a book, and write therein all the words that I have spoken unto thee against Israel, and against Judah, and against all the nations, from the day I spake unto thee, from the days of Josiah, even unto this day. It may be that the house of Judah will hear all the evil which I purpose to do unto them, that they may return every man from his evil way, that I may forgive their iniquity and their sin. And it says in verse 4, Then Jeremiah called Baruch the son of Neriah, and Baruch wrote from the mouth of Jeremiah all the words of the Lord, which he had spoken unto him upon the roll of a book. So we see this in Jeremiah 36. We see it in Ezra chapter 6, that this concept of a flying roll has to do with literally when it's talking about a book rolled up in a scroll. And so this is kind of painting the picture of what this the purpose of a flying roll is doing. As we kind of bring it back to Zechariah chapter 5. But we're seeing this sixth vision is pretty much where you're going to see, as you plug in what it is that it's all about, is here's where we're going to learn about God and how he deals with the broken covenant. It's not just what you read about in Leviticus 26, chapter 26 through 28. let's see, 26 to 28. But we're going to see also how he's going to deal with the covenant. I want to make sure we're not timing out here, but how he's going to deal with the covenant in Leviticus chapter 26 through Leviticus chapter 28. And what we'll see here in, let me see if I've got it here in verse, we saw this in verse 1, but when you see here the concept, we saw what the roll was. The reason why it's flying is it's meant to talk about, if we bring it to a modern day example, here we are in Florida, if you ever go to the beach and you see an airplane flying by with a sign saying, shop at Ron John Surf Shop or whatever, it's illustrating something. It's illustrating a message that everyone can see if they just look up and they see something flying by, they see a message flying by. And or eat at Joe's Crab Shack, or eat at wherever, or shop at this store, whatever. It's a message that's flying by. And so when you see it says, then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. So when you're seeing this flying roll going by, it's the point that all of Israel can essentially look and see that there's this message here. There's something that's to be broadcasted. There's no television at this time. There's no electricity. So there's something that can be brought up like a billboard or brought up like a sign, brought up. It can be lifted up and illustrated so that society can read what's going on here. And in this case, it's going to be dealing with, as we kind of keep reading through, that God is dealing with the fact that the Leviticus 26 covenant has been broken. So he's going to deal with everybody according to the curses that are in this covenant, breaking of the laws. So he says this here. So verse 2 says, and he said unto me, what seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. And just to equate it to measurements that we know and understand, 1 cubit is about 18 inches. So this is a big flying roll. So this is something that is a message, or when you think modern day billboard or advertisement, that's very big. It needs to be, understood by all who see it. So we see that there. And then we go into verse 3, it says, then he said unto me, this is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth. For every one that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side, according to it, and every one that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side, according to it. So some of the things we see in the description of this flying roll, this roll, this book, rolled up in a scroll, is that there's two sides to it. Because if you see, it says, this is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth, for everyone that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side. So he's going to refer to people who are stealing, which is, thou shalt not steal, one of the 613 commandments. In fact, it's one of the 10 commandments. You're not to steal. Israel has a commandment in the law, you're not to steal. That's one of the things that are marked on this scroll, issues concerning thieves and people who steal. So it says, for everyone that stealeth shall be cut off as on this side according to it. On one side, it's going to talk all about stealing, curses that are according to it, based on the law. And of course, that's one side of the scroll. The other side of the scroll says, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off as on that side according to it. So you got two sides. One's talking about stealing, one's talking about swearing. It's not just swearing in general, but let me see if we can find it. First, if we look at Deuteronomy 27, verse 16, earlier in this verse, it said, then he said to me, this is the curse. Now, again, the curse is according to those who break the law. So we'll get to the stealing and the swearing part of it in a minute. But Deuteronomy 27, verse 16, when we see the law first dispense, if you want to call it that, we see in Deuteronomy 27, verse 16, what you see here, it says things like, if we won't read all of it, but if you see a lot in verse 16, it's cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field, and cursed shalt thy basket. I mean, just the whole chapter talks about nothing more than cursings. And I think if we kind of keep looking through it all the way to verse 25 talks about verse 26, and thy carcass shall be meat unto all the fowls of the air and unto the beasts of the earth. No man shall fray them away. But you're seeing all the curses that are going on. Deuteronomy 27. So there are curses that are associated with the breaking of the law. And you're seeing an example of it in Deuteronomy 27. Cursed is this, cursed is this. These are the curses that are going to take place as the law gets broken further and further and further. And so when he says this, and we come back to Zechariah chapter 5, verse 3, he's saying, this is the curse that goes forth over the face of the whole earth. And so when this takes place, this is going to refer not to anybody, which will be in the ages to come. In this case, we know something Zechariah didn't know, that there's this interruption. We're in the dispensation of grace now. Eventually, this dispensation is going to be wrapped up. We're going to be caught up, and this is going to affect the whole earth. The prophetic program will affect the whole earth. According to the Genesis 12, 1 through 3 covenant, and the curse will go forth over the face of the whole earth. This will play out. These events will play out. And so Israel will be the primary focus, but the whole world will also be involved with all of this in the ages to come. And so this curse will go forth over the face of the whole earth for everyone, and it goes back to the concept of stealing. Talks about how there's information written on both sides of the flying scroll. And that's a normal thing. If we look real quick as a cross-reference, Exodus chapter 32 and verse 15. I want to go there for a quick moment. Exodus 32 and verse 15. Even when Moses brought the law down from Mount Sinai, in Exodus 32, verse 15, here's where he's bringing it down. It says, and Moses turned and went down from the mount, and the two tables of the testimony were in his hand. So he's got the two tables of the testimony in his hand, what you commonly see in the movies and what you commonly see in everything else. It says, and the tables were written on both their sides. So it's a normal thing that both their sides would have something written on it. Just like you're seeing with the flying scroll, both their sides have something written on them. It's a normal thing. On the one side and on the other were they written. So, and the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God graven upon the tables. So it's a normal thing that this is something where both sides have something written on it. It's not like it's unique only to Zechariah chapter 5. You see this all the way with the two tablets in Exodus 32. So again, we just plug it in some cross references and everything else. But when we see more about the concept of stealing, and then we see this here in verse 3, he says, for everyone that steals shall be cut off, as on this side according to it. The concept of stealing, even the Lord, when he shows up in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, he talks about the concept of stealing. And if we look at John chapter 10, this is where he goes and he explains to Israel. It's going to be John chapter 10, and we're going to go into verse 1. There, John chapter 10, verse 1. Talk about thieves, robbers, and stealing. It says, for everyone that stealeth shall be cut off, as on this side according to grain, almost like a branch, the branches of Romans 11 and everything else. It says, verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And it says, and when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. And the stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. So again, you're seeing when it comes to this idea, especially in verse 1, he says, he that climbeth in some other way, the same as a thief and the robber, talking about Israel's religious system with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They refuse to listen to the instructions of the Lord Jesus Christ, and they want to climb in through some other way. Man-made rules, man-made laws. They don't want to obey what the Lord's telling, even through prophecy. They don't want to be in Christ through prophecy. They want to do things their own way, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and so the Lord calls them, thieves and robbers. And so those that will obey man rather than God, even in prophecy, he's referring to that and much more. As we see, they're talking about, for everyone that stealeth shall be cut off, as on this side according to it. And then, of course, that's one side of the scroll, referring to the sins that are associated with that, and then the curses that are associated with those sins. And we'll see the effect on that in just a minute. It says, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off on that side according to it. So again, you got the other side of the scroll, you've got it talking about swearing. And of course, swearing is not just in regards to oaths. You see that in the book of Matthew, don't take don't swear to an oath, and that refers back to other cross references in the Old Testament as well. But you also see referring to blasphemy as far as when it comes to the concept of them swearing. If you look at Revelation chapter 13, verse 16. Revelation 13:16, you'll see mainly where the concepts of stealing and swearing is going to be coming from in the ages to come. And we'll see this here. Revelation 13, I'm sorry, verse 6, Revelation 13:6. Talking about the Antichrist. Actually, we'll go up to verse 4. It says, and they worshiped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. So we're seeing the Antichrist just flat out blaspheming. That's just how he speaks. And we know that from 2 Thessalonians 2, when he declares himself to be God, and he's just, everything he says is wickedness, is blasphemy, so on and so forth. And so we're seeing examples of this here. Stealing and swearing in general from verse 3 focuses on the two sins that the Antichrist ministry is going to focus on when it comes to the little flock of Israel and the ages to come. And with these two sins, they're going to try to destroy at least the little flock of Israel in the ages to come. And even Malachi talks about it. If we go one book over to Malachi chapter 3 in verse 9. Malachi chapter 3, verse 9, you'll see that the Lord kind of gives them a warning about all this. And he's more so talking about Israel at that time. Of course, he says, ye are cursed with a curse. We're kind of seeing that here a little bit. It says, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. But then when we look even further at Malachi chapter 4 in verse 5, he says, behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming and great and dreadful day of the Lord. That's in the ages to come again, dealing with the Antichrist, dealing with the mark of the beast, dealing with all the events from the book of Revelation that we also cross-referred to in Matthew 24. It says, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. He's looking to do that in Zechariah chapter 5. So as he comes to do and smite the earth with a curse based on the sins that are written on the flying roll there, because of the events that have taken place, because of everything that's happening in the ages to come, he's looking to come and smite the earth with a curse because of everything we see there. And as this is happening through the cross references in Malachi chapter 3, cursing Israel there, but not just Israel, but the whole earth with a curse. He says, behold, I send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. So Elijah is going to show up before this takes place. Since we're in Zechariah chapter 5, if we back up one and look at Zechariah chapter 4, we'll see this is where he shows up in verse 9. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 9. And of course, we're seeing this is the leader of Israel after they go through their 70-year captivity. And it's Zerubbabel. It says, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also finish it, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto you. For who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord which run to and fro through the whole earth. Then answered I and said unto him, what are these 2 olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick, and upon the left thereof, or left side thereof? And I answered again and said unto him, what be these 2 olive branches which through the 2 golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? And he answered me and said, knowest thou not what these be? And I said, no, my Lord. Then said he, these are the 2 anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. We've got the 2 anointed ones here. What you see in Revelation are the 2 witnesses that go around and preach in the end times, which are Moses and Elijah, which go back to Malachi chapter 4, verse 5 and 6, saying Elijah is going to show up before the great and terrible day of the Lord. And so you're cross-referring Zechariah chapter 4 to Malachi chapter 4 to the events of the book of Revelation, where you're seeing Elijah showing up before they're all cursed with a curse, essentially. But there's where you're seeing it in Zechariah chapter 5, verse 3. Then he said unto me, This is the curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth. For everyone that stealeth shall be cut off, as on this side according to it, and everyone that sweareth shall be cut off, as on that side according to it. So we plug all that together, and we're kind of seeing that there, as it even goes back to Elijah being one of the two witnesses in the book of Revelation, mentioned in Malachi 4, mentioned here in Zechariah 4. So this kind of plugging this all together and lining it up, we're seeing that this is where the purpose of the flying roll is kicking in for. So verse 4, as we continue forth, he says, I will bring it forth, saith the Lord of hosts, and it shall enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that sweareth falsely by my name, and it shall remain in the midst of the house, of his house, and shall consume it with the timber thereof, and with the stones thereof. So what you're pretty much seeing is, without too many cross references there, just for time's sake, is that the curse is so effective. If we look at, say, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 33, this curse is going to be so effective when it comes into play. That's Proverbs 3:33. It says that this is a curse that goeth forth over the face of the whole earth. That's in verse 3. For everyone that stealeth and everyone that sweareth, he says, I'll bring it forth, and it'll enter into the house of the thief, and into the house of him that sweareth falsely. And let's see, Proverbs 3:33 real quick says, the curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, but he blesseth the habitation of the just. So you see a good cross-reference there talking about how the curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked. But this curse is going to be so intense that, as you see from Zechariah chapter 5, verse 4, it's going to go into the house of the thief and into the house of him that sweareth falsely by the name of the Lord. It's going to remain in the midst of the house, this curse, destroying the individual, destroying the very house of the individual. It will consume him with the timber thereof and the stones thereof. It's going to destroy the very material of the house, let alone the individual, let alone the family of the individual. The curse of the Lord is so intense, everything you read about in Deuteronomy 27, that it won't just consume the sinner, per se, the one who curses and the one who steals, but it's going to go and build on top of the family of the individual and on top of the house of the individual. And so that's how intense this curse goes. So we see that there. And so this is how this plays out there. You also see this in Habakkuk chapter 2, and I'll just give out the cross references for time's sake. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 9 through 11, Amos chapter 9, verses 1 through 4. So I'll give those cross references out, and I'll let everyone kind of refer to that and look through there. But then as we get into Zechariah chapter 5, verse 5, now we're going from the sixth vision, and this is where this is pretty much wrapped up with the sixth vision. We're done with the sixth vision. This is something where he was talking about. The whole point was this scroll, this flying roll, was meant to be an explanation of this is the law. You Israel, and in fact the whole world, in the ages to come, you guys break the law, you guys get the curse of it. And so this is an explanation of this. Is a broadcasting of this. You can't just break the Leviticus 26 or the Levitical covenants and expect to get away from it, especially those of you who steal, especially you who swear falsely by my name, which the Antichrist is going to be great at, and he's going to be teaching others to be great at doing that. And of course, stealing and swearing falsely is how they want to have all of the world try to destroy the little flock of Israel through those two sins. But in verse 5, he says, Then the angel that talked with me went forth and said unto me, Lift up now thine eyes and see what is this that goeth forth. So we're moving on to something else now, which is the seventh vision. And if you remember, we were talking about how the visions are now getting into wrath and vengeance and so on and so forth. That was what the sixth vision did. So now the seventh one is going to do the same thing. And so he says in verse 6, And I said, What is it? And he said, This is an ephah that goeth forth. And he said, moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. And so as he goes forth, he's talking about what is it? And he said, this is an ephah that goeth forth. An ephah, if we look at when he talks about manna, it's in Exodus 16. We'll go there real quick. Exodus 16:33. We're going to see it here. Exodus 16:33. What it is just real quick while we're turning there. An ephah is kind of like explaining in a way of saying it's like a bushel or a basket or a case. So it's a box that is explained as a measurement. So we'll see this in Exodus chapter 16, verse 33, where it says, and Moses said unto Aaron, take a pot and put an omer full of manna therein, and lay it up before the Lord to be kept for your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, so Aaron laid it up before the testimony to be kept. And the children of Israel did eat manna 40 years until they came to a land uninhabited, or inhabited, I'm sorry. They did eat manna until they came to the borders of the land of Canaan. Now, an omer is a 10th part of an ephah. So you're saying that an ephah is indeed a measurement. And this is something where they're going to take that measurement and they're going to go ahead and use this. In this case, it's like a basket or a bushel. It's a box of some sort where an ephah, if you have an ephah, you could say, go out and get me 2 ephahs of apples or oranges or pears or whatever. An ephah, you're telling someone to get a specific measurement of something. In this case, it's going to be in the form of a box or a basket or something. And so when you plug that into where we're at, it says in verse 6, and I said, what is it? And he said, this is an ephah, like a basket or a box. It's a specific measurement that Israel knows exactly what this is. That goeth forth. And he said, moreover, this is their resemblance through all the earth. So it's pretty much saying this is their resemblance. So when the earth looks at this situation that's being explained in the 7th vision, and they see what's happening here, this is what it's going to resemble, is what he's saying here in the 6th verse. This is their resemblance through all the earth. When the earth sees this, this is what it's going to resemble to them. So we see this here. And so verse 7 says, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is, I'll just read the verses real quick and break it down. And behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. And he said, this is wickedness. And he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. And so we'll see verse 7 and 8 here. But so what he does is he says, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. So you start out in verse 6, you've got an ephah, you've got this box or this basket. And he says, he starts out with that. He says, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. So you've got this basket, and then a talent of lead is lifted up. And it says, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. So now in this vision explained, you've got this basket or this ephah, and you have a woman inside of the basket, just sitting inside the basket. In the midst of the basket is this woman sitting there. And he's already lifted up as it says there, a talent of lead in this vision. And so now we're starting to see a little bit of the picture of the 7th vision. You've got this talent of lead lifted up. You got a basket with a woman inside it. And he says, where did it go? This is an ephah that goeth forth. This is the semblance. Verse 7, and behold, there was lifted up a talent of lead. And it says, and this is a woman that sitteth in the midst of the ephah. And then so as we go there, he says, now the angel he takes something else. And he says, and he's declared it to be wickedness. He says, and he said, this is wickedness. So he's got something else. And he says, this is wickedness. And as we see that from verse 8, he takes something else and says, this is wickedness. And he casts it into the midst of the ephah. The woman's already in the ephah. The woman's already in the midst of the ephah. He takes something else, declares it to be wickedness. And if you would say that the woman is wicked too, if you wanted to go that route, I wouldn't, fight you on that by any means, because we'll see what it means in a minute. And it says, and he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of lead upon the mouth thereof. So he's taking this item and saying, this is wickedness, and cast it into the basket with the woman. So in this basket, you have a woman, and you have this item that's wickedness. So wickedness is there in the basket with this woman in this vision. You have a woman and you have something declared to be wickedness. And then he takes the weight of lead that he picked up in the first place and he casts it down on the mouth. He kind of slams the basket shut, the ephod shut. He slams it shut. He's like, okay, let's throw this in here with the woman and slam it shut, lock it down. And that's what you're seeing in verse 8. He says, and that's what we're seeing here. Now, in order to kind of see, what are we looking at here? What does all this mean? Why are we seeing, wickedness in a basket with a woman? What does all this mean? Is there any verses in the Bible where wickedness is side by side with a woman, or is there a woman, next to wickedness, riding wickedness, around wickedness? And for that, the answer for that is yes. We have to go to Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. As we see this with Babylon, as we're reading this through the book of Zechariah, as they return out of their captivity from Babylon, what God is saying is you've gone through your Babylonian captivity, but Babylon's going to come back. You're not done with it yet. The system's coming back, the city's coming back, everyone's coming back. You rode out your 70 years, but they themselves are not going away. This is being explained to them. It says in Revelation 17, verse 1, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman, sit upon the scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy. We've been seeing the blasphemy going on, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There's the woman sitting on, which is the beast, the Antichrist. The woman is sitting on the Antichrist. Now, another name we can have for the Antichrist. Let's just keep reading Revelation 17. We'll get to that in a minute. It says, and the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So Babylon, or Babylonian religion, or the Babylon city, Babylon the Great, is the mother of harlot, the mother of all these false religions and everything else. Babylon is the mother of that, the woman. And she's got a lot of children that we'll see in a minute with wings and everything else that take her to safety. But nonetheless, what we're seeing here is that the mystery from Zechariah 5 is clearly revealed to be Babylon the Great. And so we see this play out here in verse 5. Revelation chapter 17, verse 5 is what we're seeing. But when you see that this woman is riding, who the woman is, look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and I've got to find the exact verse here. 2 Thessalonians 2, let's find it. Verse 8, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8, the Lord's talking about the Antichrist here, and he says, as he titles him and refers to him and names him, it says, and then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. When he calls the Antichrist wicked, he's got a capital W there, referring to him like this guy, his very name, his very persona, his very essence, as a capital W. This guy is, wicked. This guy is wicked. And so when you go back and you cross-refer that to where we are, in Zechariah chapter 5, and you're seeing that you've got a basket, an ephod, and you've got a woman with wickedness thrown inside it. That's what you're seeing in Revelation 17. You're seeing a woman riding wickedness, and you've got this being pretty much set up and ready to go. In Zechariah chapter 5 is that it's being taken. And we'll get to what all this is going to build up and mean in just a minute, because there's still more verses to dig through. But this is Revelation 17 kind of getting lined up and ready. So we see this in verse 8 saying, and he said, this is wickedness, and he cast it into the midst of the ephah, and he cast the weight of the lead upon it. Kind of shut the ephah, shut the basket down. in verse 9, as we go there, he says, Then I lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork. Now, lots of time, what this is meaning is this is when you go through and you study the Babylonian religions and everything, the offshoots of the Babylonian religions are going to be other religions. The children of Babylon, the woman has children, or the woman has other religions spawn off from it. Some of these other religions are going to be the religions of Baal and Balaam and Baal worship and all these things that have spawned out into what we're pretty much surrounded by today. All these other false religions and things that are worshiping all these different things. And some of what we see here says, and I then lifted I up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had the wings of a stork. Every time you see pictures of what angels look like, they're supposed to be women or men with wings on the back, like birds or like a stork. But actually, that's actually showing that's the persona of Baal worship. If we look at Judges chapter 10, verse 6, we'll start there in Judges chapter 10, verse 6. No angel of the true and living God in your Bible has wings or has a halo. So whenever you see a picture or a Christmas card or an Easter card or a card of any type that shows a so-called angel with a halo around it or wings on it, that's actually the worship of a false god, worship of Baal worship. Judges chapter 10, verse 6 says, And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam. Balaam has women with stork wings that help worship their false god. Balaam has men and women with halos around them that help worship their false god. That's Balaam, not the Lord Jesus Christ, not God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, not the God of the Bible. The false gods have halos for angels. The false gods have wings that look like birds on the back. Those are the false gods. But it says, did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam and Ashtaroth and the gods of Syria and the gods of Zidon and the gods of Moab and the gods of the children of Ammon and the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord and served not him. And so you're seeing this come into play in Judges chapter 10. And then if we look at 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 31. 1 Kings chapter 16 and verse 31. And you see it again here. It says, And it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took to wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. And he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him. And so worshiping Baal by having those stork-winged creatures, by having those halo-looking servants, whatever they are, did more to get God upset by the worshiping of Balaam or Baal than anything else. So coming back to Zechariah chapter 5, and we're there in verse 9. It says, Then lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings, for they had the wings of a stork. You're seeing more offshoots of this Babylonian religion. And it says there and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heavens. So they're taking this ephah away that has wickedness and the woman in it from Revelation 17. And that's what they're doing with it. And then he says, Then said I to the angel that talked with me, Whither do these bear the ephah? Where are you taking this thing? And it says, And he said unto me, To build an house in the land of Shinar. So they're going to build a house for it. They're going to go set this thing up again. And so we look at actually, I'll refer to it. I've got it on our outline here. It's Genesis chapter 10, in verse 10. Genesis 10:10 pretty much says here, talking about Shinar, talking about all these things here. It says that, the beginning of his kingdom, talking about Nimrod, that's another thing I should send off a little message to you. Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. So they're going to build the Tower of Babel. They're going to build all these wicked things that are disobedient to the Lord in the land of Shinar, which is going to associate itself with Babylon. That's Genesis chapter 10, verse 10. You can see it again, more verses in Genesis chapter 11, verse 2. But Babel, Tower of Babel, or Babel itself, is going to be in Shinar, which is going to relate itself to Babylon. And so that's what we're going to see there. And then it says in verse 11, Zechariah 5:11, and he said unto me to build it an house in the land of Shinar, and it shall be established and set there upon her own base. It's going to be set upon its own base. It's going to be established. It's going to be reestablished so that in the ages to come, it can cause trouble all over again, just like it just did for the children of Israel as they served their 70-year penance. So they just got done serving their 70 years captivity. Pretty much the same, just as Israel was captive and headquartered in Babylon for all intents and purposes for those days, in the days of the book of Zechariah, as that's written. We see that God's, explanation and prophecy regarding this in Zechariah chapter 5 is that this wicked system, this wicked city, literally and spiritually, is going to be picked up and kicked up again, brought forth again, used again, brought forth again. The mother of harlots is going to be riding the Antichrist in the ages to come. It's going to be brought forth to full fruition and used to deceive the whole earth with. And it'll be back later, and it'll be back later with a vengeance. But it's brought up and it's brought away so that it can be used for more intense and wicked purposes. So we see that this is the point in Zechariah chapter 5 and that seventh vision. And we also see what's going on with Zechariah chapter 5 and the sixth vision. But when we look at Zechariah's role, all in all, we wanted to see the point today of just going through Zechariah chapter 5 and seeing the sixth and seventh vision. It's got 8 total. Again, like one time we'll have an opportunity to go through all 8 visions. We've already gone through some in our previous studies, but we just wanted to take a moment to go through this, kind of have some cross references to the book of Revelation, some cross references to whether it be Genesis, whether it be Jeremiah, whether it be some of these other verses, some of these other parts, whether it was Malachi, more in Zechariah, more in Exodus. We wanted to go to these cross references, kind of open up the book of Zechariah so we can see it is a book that is understandable. We can study it, we can learn from it, we can benefit from it, we can rightly divide it. 2 Timothy 2:15, understand we're not the audience in it, but we can learn from it, benefit from it, and see where it shows up in other books as well. And we can kind of grow from there. So with that, we'll stop here and see if there's any kind of thoughts or questions on the sixth and seventh vision of Zechariah, Zechariah's role, if we want to call this our study for today, and kind of go from there. Mhm. Yeah. So, yeah, we'll kind of take it from there. But yeah, we just wanted to go through that and take the opportunity to go through Zechariah. It's always a good, interesting book with all those visions in it. And then after the 8 visions, then it continues on with Zechariah talking about the Messiah, the end times, things like that. So it's always good to read that book. It's a deep book with a lot of, you've got to really have the cross references ready to go, the thinking cap on, the right division, all that stuff ready to go and ready to explore it. But it's a great book. So, well, yeah, there's no question. We can wrap up for today and then be back here again on Sunday for another study. So, yeah, we'll stop here and glad everyone was able to join us for today. We'll head out and be back here on Sunday for another study.